Welcome everyone to our April Faber sessions, which is the final class of our Narnia series that started back in September. So we have made it through, and here we are at the last battle. So grateful for all of you who could join us live. We know, as Father Ganz mentioned, we've got a national championship going, and maybe even some people that were traveling or busy with all the eclipse activities around the country. So we're glad you're here, those of you who are here right now, and for anyone who's listening online later. As always, I'll keep everyone muted, and at times of conversation, we can unmute and people can join in that way. So thanks again for being here, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Coraline, for being here with us too. Welcome all of you on this. We just had our second Sunday of Easter, so remember that Easter Day, in the way the church counts it, as in the Catholic Church, but also traditionally long before we split into our different groups, the understanding was that the great feasts, because of the thickness of meaning in them, never were just one day. So Easter Day is 8 days long, is how the church understands it. It's called the octave. And so all during that time at the masses every day within the Catholic tradition, we hear as a gospel one of the different resurrection accounts. So there's Easter Sunday that begins the octave, and then that completes on the second Sunday of Easter, it's called. So the first Sunday is Easter. The second Sunday, Divine Mercy Sunday, or the second Sunday of Easter. And all of that, starting with Easter, is 7 times 7 plus 1. 7 times 7 days is 49, plus 1 is 50. And in Greek, Pentecost means 50th day. So we are in Easter tide, or the Easter season. And it seems somehow fitting that we're doing the last battle during the Easter season. As Mary says, this Faber Sessions has taken 7 books plus 1. You remember in December, we took Christmas carols and read our way into those beautiful poetic texts to prepare us for the coming of Christmas. So this whole Faber Sessions, Series 10, has had 8 parts to it. And this now concludes it. And those of you who have walked us along all the way through, it's been such a pleasure to be with you. And those losers who only came in occasionally, well, I guess we still like you. Isn't it great? So anyway, I'm just obviously being playful with you. It's always nice to have you here. And this is an extraordinarily beautiful book. But one of the things about April 8th this year that's different than other April 8ths is that March 25th is the Feast of the Incarnation, the Solemnity of the Incarnation, or sometimes referred to as the Annunciation to Mary. It's the moment that her yes in response to an angel's courteous asking of her was directly responsible for bringing Christ into the world. Because Christ, God, is utmost, at his utmost, is courteous and will always ask. Never impose or manipulate. I'm going to get her to say yes no matter what. In fact, sometimes I've wondered whether and we can playfully do this as we contemplate these mysteries of Christ. We can playfully and faithfully wonder. I have wondered whether there were other young girls whom the angel had asked who said no. We're not told that. But I know in most everything I've asked that's kind of challenging, there are a lot of people say, no, not right now. And it comes up in the gospel. Let me go bury my dead. Let me go take care of this first, or let me go. I mean, that is very typical, right? So what if it turned out that there were other girls that the angel came to and they said, not not now, not yet, or no, never, or what are you thinking? Can I see your credentials that you are an angel? Could you prove that you are who you are? All those things. I've also wondered, prayerfully and creatively wondered, whether Mary was asked several times before she said yes. Because that's been true for me and almost everyone I know, that when something has come towards them and they've been asked clearly, it's clearly a sense that God is offering them that something, that they're not quite ready for it, but God in his courtesy will come back on it. And I usually, if I'm involved in it in some way, I'm aware of it, I'll say, just know there's no push in God. And so maybe not yet, but God will ask again. What will you say next time? We have to open the possibility that Mary, like us, is genuinely human and has to figure things out like we do. All we remember her for, which I wish all of us could be remembered for that, are the times that we really said yes and were courageous about it. Wouldn't it be great if that's what people remembered about us instead of the times we said no or later or I'm too busy? It'd be great. The Feast of the Annunciation, or the Feast of the Incarnation, when the Word became flesh and dwelt among us in the womb of Mary, who said yes, is always March 25th. But March 25th this year landed in Holy Week. And you can't have a competing feast day in Holy Week where Christ is the absolute center of everything in that week. So the feast day was removed to today. So today, the church, as in the Catholic Church in its liturgical calendar, is celebrating the solemnity of the Annunciation today. And just out of respect for that, I would just like to take you to a fresco from Florence, Italy. A fresco painted by a Dominican friar by the name of the Angelic Friar, Fra Angelico. So I'm going to pop up this painting that is one of 50 illustrations he painted on the walls of the Dominican convent in Florence. He was, during his time, the most famous Renaissance painter that was working in Europe. Just take a look at this, and this will be our acknowledgement of the solemnity and our desire to honor Mary. And then we'll make a transition, which won't be as lame as you think it will be. Okay, so let me pop up the share screen and have you look at this painting of the Annunciation by Fra Angelico. Can y'all see it? Now, when a person comments, I don't want what I feel about it to affect how you feel about it. But I find this almost overwhelmingly beautiful. It's stunningly simple in design. There's a young girl and there's an angel. There are no words. A lot of paintings of the Annunciation show in kind of a ribbon coming out of the mouth of one, the Latin expression, what do you think, girl? You know, or Mary's response. There are no words. But as you look at it, as you're drawn in, and the use of light, you feel there's a profound and intimate connection between these two beings. Look at the splendor in the wing of that angel. That is simply extraordinary. the detailing and beauty of the wings. Notice that Mary already has a halo. You normally think a halo comes later, after years and years and years of laboring in the work of God, that you are eventually recognized as holy. But of course, that always misconstrues holy, because technically, when the moment God made us, when we were conceived in the womb, we were as holy as anything could possibly make us. We are beloved of God, which is what holy means. Holiness is not what we accomplish. Ask any saint, and the first thing they'll say is, I didn't do this. In fact, I don't believe I deserve the gifts that come through my life. There's Mary looking intently at the angel, and the angel looking back. Now, one thing that's interesting, and these are 2 points, and then I'll finish with this. I'll finish with a little prayer. Is notice the enormous size of Mary and the angel in relation to the room. And so you start to get this sense that the inside is a lot bigger than the outside. If they stood up, their heads would be hitting the ceiling. And there's no way they're going to get through that door back there. So it gives us a sense that holiness means big in being. The holier and closer to God, the bigger in being we become. And so the only way he has of conveying that is by making them physically big, as if to say their inside is huge. And the second thing is, look out there in the garden. It is just a stunningly delicate presentation in a fresco, for heaven's sakes, painted on a wall. The delicacy of the flowers and the detailing in the stems and the leaves and the veins. It really is extraordinarily beautiful. He started off as an illustrator of books, and you see his technique in the richness of the natural world there. But the fact that there are flowers there tells us, and the kind of flowers, and that they're white, that this is springtime. And remember, March 25th is right after the vernal equinox, right after the official start of spring. So the idea of the incarnation of the Word is the springtime of humanity. It's the beginning of life and something fresh and new, where before it was winter and cold and everything looked dead. There are themes here that will be important in our novel. Let me conclude with this. It's a prayer in the form of a hymn, and then we'll move to our text. Well, actually, what we'll move next to is I'm going to ask Coraline Edmonds if she has something to say after the prayer, if she wants to, just as an opening comment to us about what has she liked most about the last battle. Okay? Okay, here's the prayer. Son of God, and thy Son, Lady, Mary, Mother full of grace, born of God without beginning, born thy babe in time and place. No division, no confusion, God and man in unity, human's nature, true salvation, union with the Trinity. God is with us, Christ is for us, earth's new baby, heaven's Lord. Blessed are thou, O blessed Mother, of the mighty light adored. Darkness cannot overcome him. Heaven's brightness shines abroad. Jesus, Savior, God made lowly, Word made flesh, thy Son, thy God. Amen. So, Coraline, only if you want to. Would you like to turn on your sound if you want to do that? Oh, you have the book there. I love that, and I love the color. What's your favorite part of this novel? And I'll let Coraline say if she wants to. And then I'd like to invite others of you, if you would also say, if you have read it, and remember, don't feel put off if you haven't read it. It just makes you a loser. Don't put off, just don't worry about that. Just enjoy listening to what other people say. And maybe when you get a chance to read it, you'll have your favorite spots too. Okay. So Coraline, is there anything, what's your favorite character or favorite part of this novel? Even though you have one chapter to go.
Joe brought back the donkey.
Who brought back the donkey?
When Joe got the donkey.
When Jill went and got the donkey.
What's the donkey's name? Do you remember?
Puzzle.
Wonderful. And why did you like that, Coraline, when Jill, who's one of the great heroines of Narnia, one of the women heroines, we know she's a friend of Narnia, one of the seven, but she's one of the great women heroes of the Narnia cycle, along with Lucy.
I liked it because it was funny.
So what was funny about it, just so I can understand?
They weren't expecting.
It's high-level consult.
When Tyrion said, "Dan, like, why did you go get that donkey?" Yeah, it was just unexpected. I think everyone else was like, "Where did you go?" And why'd you
Isn't
come
it
back?"
great? I love that about Jill, that she's incredibly courageous. She's the quietest, moving in the woods. Even King Tyrion says, my gosh, this girl really knows how to move in the woods. And that she would be so courageous as to go all the way into the very heart of trouble and pull the donkey free and bring him back. She's amazing. Thank you, Cora. Anyone else? What was a favorite spot? What was a favorite part of the book for you?
I just loved that it was this small group that banded together and they were very aware of what they were facing, and they said, "We're going to go for it anyway."
We're going to go for it anyway.
Just they were all in with knowing they had to do something hard and saying, "Okay, let's all go do this." There's just a spirit to that.
I agree. What do you think what gave them each the courage, if that's the word you're implying, to go right at what really scared them? Do you think that was the same in each character? So courage is the same in no matter who has it? Or was it a different kind of courage grounded in a different thing in each person?
Well, I'd have to think about that more, but I think they all knew the truth, and they all knew that the truth was important and important enough to them.
Yes.
And there might have been different motivations, but I think that was a big piece of it. That was for them. They knew the truth, and they were going to stand up for that and fight for it.
Thank you, Mary.
I
Anyone
think
else?
for me, of course, nothing beats Narnia Heaven. That's where I've wanted to go ever since I read the books. But I kind of liked the scene where all of the kings and queens of Narnia are together talking about it. It kind of shows the difference in the timetable too between our world and the Narnia world, where thousands of years had gone by, and yet it was just a couple of generations in our world.
I loved that one too. I loved that do you remember when they first met them? When they first appeared, where it was?
Well, first they were together. There was the scene with them together, and then all of a sudden they just all appeared once they went through the door of the stable. Then they all kind of appeared,
That's right.
and
So it's
they didn't see them all at once necessarily, but they all kind of appeared at the same time.
so they appeared twice. That's right.
Mhm.
So one is in the vision that he thought was a dream that King Tyrion had, and he
Yeah, I love that.
suddenly sees them all sitting together at dinner in our world, if you will. And the next time he sees them, they're dressed quite differently. And the vibe, if you will, that's coming off them is so extraordinarily different. And that's inside the stable. Okay, they see them twice. It is majestic. I wonder if you know this. I'll just drop this in here. In the time of this book, King Tyrion is in his early 20s. Professor Diggory Kirk, remember him from The Magician's Nephew? He's 61 years old now. And Polly Plummer, the girl he met, when he was blubbering, she's 60 years old. Peter is 22. Susan is 21 years old, and there's a sadness in the story around her. Edmund is 19. Lucy is 17. Jill is 16 years old, and Eustace is 16 years old. Those are the ages in this story of the 7 friends of Narnia. Just kind of fun to... Let me check in. Anyone else? A favorite spot in the novel? Yeah, the Sharp, House of Sharp. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I remember when I was starting this book, the last battle, I was just asking myself, how is C.S. Lewis, this enormous mind and heart in Christ, how is he going to tell us his vision of the way history ends? I remember starting the book thinking about that. And when we get to those last couple of chapters, higher up and deeper in, that which is inside is bigger than that which is outside. It was just sort of a confluence of these glorious moral virtues of honor and bravery, friendship, peacemaking, the fierce joy of climbing up flowing rivers and so on. And it was just such a extraordinary, sensual, really, spectacle that I would never have expected from him. And so it was just an exquisite vision of what life is like in Aslan, in Christ. And he didn't disappoint. I thought it was just wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. It happens in the different chronicles, but this is certainly one occasion that you're describing where there's a profound mystical element in his writing, that it goes way beyond him. And you get a sense of something coming through his writing that is transcendently beautiful, truly beautiful. So anyway, thank you all. Cora, thank you for getting us started on this. And thank you all for what you've shared. Let's kind of tip our way into certain thoughts. And I'd like to begin by having you listen with me from the last battle, chapter 4. And I just want to read this little section, point out some things, just so that as we enter the book, we're hearing the sound of the book in our ears. So, chapter 4, he, Tyrion, thought of other kings who had lived and died in Narnia in old times. And it seemed to him that none of them had ever been so unlucky as himself. He thought of his great-grandfather's great-grandfather, King Rilian. Cora, do you remember that was in the Silver Chair when King Rilian was Prince Rilian, who had been stolen away by a witch when he was a young prince and kept hidden for years in the dark caves beneath the land of the northern giants. But then it had all come right in the end, for two mysterious children had suddenly appeared from the land beyond the world's end and had rescued him, that's Rilian, so that he came home to Narnia and had a long and prosperous reign. Now, do you guys remember what the two children were? Who they were?
Jill and Eustace.
Jill and Eustace?
Jill and Eustace, exactly. So they were the ones that appeared and were part with Puddleglum of finding Prince Rilian and setting him free. The thing I want you to notice as I'm reading this is Rilian is in a bind and feeling like everything's coming apart. His kingdom is falling to pieces all around him. That's why he says, no one is unlucky as I am, sort of thing. Notice his instinct, and it's already the presence of the unseen Aslan in this story. Aslan does not appear till chapter 13, right at the end of the book. And yet, he's everywhere present in this story, but you have to know how to see him in it. And one of the ways is how Rilian, caught in a bind, is set free from the inside to start remembering the past. And as he starts to remember his past and the great ones who've come before him, watch how he starts to regain his strength and how his memory of where Narnia had been starts to give him eyes to start to see what he needs to see now to help him in his leadership. Beware, beware, beware of any leader, hate using that word, who has no concept of history. Beware. Sorry, I fell into a little hole there. But then it had all come right in the end. For two mysterious children had suddenly appeared from the land beyond the world's end and had rescued him. So that he came home to Narnia and had a long and prosperous reign. Now you hear the inner battle with Tyrion. Just as he's remembering this glorious, that something happened and someone was saved and in direct lineage to him, another spirit attacks him and tries to take that confidence away. It's not like that with me, said Tyrion to himself. Hear the spirit there? That's meant to suck hope away. Then he went further back and thought about Rilian's father, Caspian the Seafarer, whose wicked uncle, King Miraz, had tried to murder him, and how Caspian fled away into the woods and lived among the dwarves. But that story, too, had all come right in the end. For Caspian also had been helped by children, only there were 4 of them that time, who came from somewhere beyond the world and fought a great battle and set him on his father's throne. In the biblical understanding, there's a verb in Hebrew, zakar. It means to remember. And the interesting thing about this verb in the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, is that only God can be the subject of the verb zakar. Because God is the one who remembers. Humans, by definition, are those who forget. And when you have a human being that is remembering, what we're supposed to understand is that was given him or her by a special gift of God, which in their remembering makes them godlike. They're able to remember the story. Remember in this time of the resurrection, how the disciples on the road to Emmaus, we had thought he was the one, and they were so disconsolate and despairing and were walking away from Jerusalem to Emmaus, completely broken. And Jesus comes secretly they didn't recognize him, and walks with them and invites them into what is going on with them. And they describe misery and loss and devastation. You and I would have felt the same. But notice what Jesus does. It says, starting with all the prophets, he went back and helped them remember the story and how it all was pointing toward this moment when this would happen and that God was in it. Do you see that? That's zakar. It's a remembering that brings us strength. This is happening here. That's why I wanted to slow it down and have you see it. Now, the bad spirit is hitting Tyrion again as soon as he remembers. And it all worked out for Caspian the seafarer. Then hear him again. But that was all a long time ago, said Tyrion to himself. That sort of thing doesn't happen now. Do you hear the temptation? It's a battle inside him. And then he remembered. For he had always been good at history when he was a boy. How those same 4 children who had helped Caspian had been Narnia over 1,000 years before. And it was then that they had done the most remarkable thing of all. For then they had defeated the terrible White Witch and ended the 100 years of winter. And after that, they had reigned, all 4 of them together, at Cair Paravel, till they were no longer children, but great kings and lovely queens. And their reign had been the golden age of Narnia. And Aslan had come into that story a lot. He had come into all the other stories too. Notice this, as Tyrion now remembered. This is the presence of Aslan in this story. You have to be able to recognize, because he's hiddenly present. That's what it means to live by faith and not by sight. Faith remembers. Aslan and children from another world, thought Tyrion. They have always come in when things were at their worst. Oh, if only they could now. And he called out, Aslan, 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 come and help us now. But the darkness and the cold and the quietness went on just the same. Let me be killed, cried the king. I ask nothing for myself, but come and save all of Narnia. That's Aslan again. That is what Aslan would say. I want nothing for myself, but save Edmund from the clutches of the White Witch. Tyrion, in his remembering, Aslan is in his spirit in the forest as he's tied to a tree and everything has gone horribly wrong. And still there was no change in the night or the wood. Now watch this. But there began to be a kind of change inside Tyrion. Without knowing why, he began to feel a faint hope. And he felt somehow stronger. Do you get it? This is the subtlety of this book. Aslan is everywhere in it, but he's only physically present at the very end of the story. This is an important book about living by faith and not by sight, and paying attention to the way Aslan and the spirit of Aslan works from the inside of those who believe in him, who remember him. Oh, Aslan, Aslan, he whispered, if you will not come yourself, at least send me the helpers from beyond the world. Or let me call them. Let my voice carry beyond the world. Then, hardly knowing that he was doing it, he suddenly cried out in a great voice, children, Poralyn, Edmonds, friends of Narnia, quick, come to me. Across the worlds I call you, I, Tyrion, King of Narnia, Lord of Cair Paravel, and Emperor of the Lone Islands. And immediately he was plunged into a dream, if it was a dream, more vivid than any he had had in his whole life. Isn't that awesome? It's a beautiful text. And it's the first time he sees the 7 friends of Narnia. And it's the first time they see him. I've suggested to you, and made explicit, I think, is that central to this novel is a life lived by faith. Or as Paul would say in the letter to the Galatians chapter 2, I have been crucified with Christ, which sounds like death, right? And yet I am alive. Yet it is no longer I, but Christ living in me. Do you see that? That's what we noticed inside Tyrion, the change. But the battle between the part of Tyrion that said, well, this can't possibly happen to me. I'm just miserable and the whole thing's going to hell. And yet the presence of this other thing inside him, causing him to remember. And as he remembers, it's reminding and teaching him. It always works out. It's to live by faith and not by sight. Paul continues, and yet I am alive, yet it is no longer I, but Christ living in me. The life that I am now living, subject to the limitation of human nature, I'm just me, I am living in faith. In faith. Not with faith. I am living in faith. Faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Beautiful. Sometimes people have asked, and I've heard it in previous times, where is Aslan in this book? From the very start, he's present. in faith. One of the challenges of this, and the reason why there's Where is Aslan, is it's very clear in this novel that Aslan has not been seen in Narnia for a very long time. Tyrion, who's in his early 20s, has never, ever lived a time when Aslan was reported as walking in Narnia, being present in Narnia, speaking, roaring, doing his beautiful Aslan thing. He has not been there. And the way the story is told is that it's been a very long time since he's been seen. And so there starts to be the challenge of what happens when Aslan is no longer physically present for us to experience his glorious beauty and to be able to put our hands into his golden mane and cover his faces with our kisses and stand between his paws. What happens when that has been so long ago? We ourselves have not even experienced. We've heard it told by the great-grandparents of our great-grandparents. It's possible that we lose contact with the personality of Aslan or God, and we turn Aslan or God into an idea. And as soon as God becomes an idea, not a living, vivid, personal presence to us, when God or Aslan becomes an idea, that idea can be hijacked by any smart aleck in the world and take that idea and interpret it any way they want. And I'm not saying that's always ill intent. What I mean is that an idea of God is unhooked from the reality of the personality of God, becomes sometimes just dangerous. Didn't you wish, when you heard the ape turning the idea of Aslan into exactly the kind of use he wished to make of Aslan, didn't you wish that from the very first, Aslan himself would appear and go, meow, his living, vivid presence? It would just have ended the whole thing right there. There's no way what the ape was saying could possibly be the reality of Aslan. There are no words that work to describe Aslan, the personality of the real thing. It's a problem in religion when we lose contact with the living person and only run into ideas over and over again. Just something to think about. One other comment before I stop and just ask you for your comments. One of the ways that this Aslan, whom people haven't seen for generations, one of the things as they turn Aslan into an idea, the idea they associate with him is said multiple times in the opening chapters. What they remember is Aslan is not a tame lion, which is such a revealing thing and tells you the state of the religion of Aslan, if you will, the state of where that's gone. To say in this context that Aslan is not a tame lion reveals that those who remember that about Aslan are afraid of him. Because you don't say something's not tame unless you're afraid of the untamed. They remember that Aslan is power. And they're afraid of that. Don't mess with him. He's got power. They have lost touch with the personality of Aslan, who exercises his power in the most unfrightening way, whose power is the bigness of him, the beauty and richness and depth and kindness of Aslan. That's his power. But they've lost touch with the personality and fallen for the idea of Aslan. And then the idea gets associated with Aslan can do whatever he wants. That's what it means, the power of Aslan. And that's what interests the ape, remember? He says, if you pretend you're Aslan, Puzzle, then we can tell them to do whatever we want, and they have to do it. You look wonderful, wonderful, said the ape, chapter 1. If anyone saw you now, they'd think you were Aslan, the great lion himself. Well, that would be dreadful, said Puzzle. No, it wouldn't, said Shift. Everyone would do whatever you told them. In chapter 2, the king and the unicorn stared at one another and both looked more frightened than they had ever been in any battle. Aslan, said the king at last in a very low voice. Aslan, could it be true? Could he be felling the holy trees and murdering the dryads? Well, unless the dryads have all done something dreadfully wrong. Do you hear that? Even the unicorn has a distorted understanding that the power of Aslan is a power to punish. You get out of line, you get murdered because he can do whatever he wants. And us who have followed Aslan along the stories, how preposterous that it could ever get to that, to say that of Aslan. It's just stunning. But selling them to the Calormenes, said the king, is it possible? I don't know, said Jewel miserably. He's not a tame lion. But then we recall how Aslan honors utterly the deep magic in the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Do you think that I would not obey my own rules? Aslan says in that. In other words, the power of Aslan is ordered to something greater than mere power. It's ordered to the way he actually is, the beauty and depth and deep goodness. His power is ordered to that. Recall what Aslan says to Lucy in this book in chapter 13. Aslan said, Lucy through her tears, will you do something for these poor dwarves? Dearest, said Aslan, I will show you both what I can and what I cannot do. He came close to the dwarves and gave a low growl. Low, but it set all the air shaking. But the dwarves said to one another, hear that? That's the gang at the other end of the stable trying to frighten us. They do it with a machine of some kind. Don't take any notice. They won't take us in again. Notice I will show you both what I can and what I cannot do. The can and cannot is related to Aslan's character as goodness itself. It has nothing to do with I can do what I want whenever I want to do it, and no one's going to stop me. But that's how he had been started. He had been understood that way. Before I continue, any comments? Okay, let me take a step then. Right at the start of the novel, we're introduced to the ape, whose name is Shift. And Lewis, who is such a master with language, that verb to shift is really an important one in describing how he understands evil. The story begins with an ape who's come up with an idea, which we'll call the big lie. And this is the ultimate play of evil in the world, is to get us to believe a big lie. Because as been known in the great Christian tradition, at the very center of the personality of the Satan is that he's a liar. And you hear it playfully and full of punning when J.R.R. Tolkien has this famous lyric that's part of The Lord of the Rings. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to hold them and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. Hear the pun? Shadows lie. Shadows lie. They lie. Everything that appears is a lie. Because truth is a gift of the light. And those who lack the light have no ability to know what the truth is. It's all the same to them. It's just whatever they say is what the truth is, which of course isn't the truth. But before I explore that a little bit and the significance of the big lie and what happens with it in the story, I'd like to ask you a kind of an obvious question that as soon as I ask it, you suddenly start to realize it isn't obvious at all. What is the last battle? And here, I'll need your help by being bold and taking a shot at it. We're going to just kind of see if we can work our way in. What is exactly the last battle? What would you say?
Well, Cora said the last battle is, she said, well, the last battle, like with swords. It was the fight.
And that's a perfectly legitimate answer.
Like their last fight before they die.
So let's say, chapter 12, Rishta Khan turned his back on the stable and walked slowly to a place in front of the White Rock. And remember, King Tyrion and Jill and Eustace, they're over at the White Rock with the unicorn, with their back to protect themselves from getting attacked from behind. Hearken, he said, if the boar and the dogs and the unicorn will come over to me and put themselves in my mercy, their lives shall be spared. Now, get a load of how evil spares people. The boar shall go to a cage in the Tisrock's garden, the dogs to the Tisrock's kennels, and the unicorn, when I have sawn his horn off, shall draw a cart. But the eagle, the children, and he who is the king shall be offered to Tash this night. The only answer was growls. Get on, warriors, says the Tarkhan. Kill the beasts, but take the two-legged ones alive. And then the last battle of the last king of Narnia began. That's what Cora was saying. What I'm asking you, is that the only meaning of this title?
I guess going back to kind of what I was saying at the beginning, it kind of feels like the final push for truth, really trying to put the truth out there. That seems to be what that crew is fighting for.
So isn't that important, Mary? Thank you, because in all the warring that we do as humans, we just have an unquenchable taste for it. That behind every sword that's slashed and every shield that's raised is something that's being fought for or fought against. And part of the problem and the madness of war is we end up only thinking about the weapons and the bashing and the explosions and the hurting. And often people forget why we're doing this and why will killing people actually help us get what we're looking for. Something gets completely severed from the reason. And that's what Mary just said. The last battle at another level is for the truth of things. Is Aslan for real or not? Can you substitute Aslan with something else and it's just as good? Does it matter that a donkey covered with a fur is the same as Aslan the great lion? Is that true or false? The friends of Narnia, King Tyrion at the White Rock, are fighting for their lives, but we already heard that that isn't even quite true, because Tyrion said, I don't care about my life. What I care about is that the truth of Narnia be saved. My life need not be more important than that. Do you see? So then, it raises again, have we fully plumbed the depths of what the last battle actually is? What if it's something like this? to take it another level. All those are right. What Cora said, what Mary said. Absolutely true. But listen to this. For 1 Corinthians 15, St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. In fact, however, Christ has been raised from the dead as the first fruits of all who have fallen asleep. As it was by one man that death came, so through one man has come the resurrection of the dead. Just as all die in Adam, so in Christ all will be brought to life. But all of them in their proper order. Christ the first fruits, and next, at his coming, those who belong to him. After that will come the end. Do you hear the word last in that? After that will come the end, when he will hand over the kingdom to God the Father, having abolished every principality, every ruling force and power, for he is to be king until he has made his enemies his footstool. Okay, you ready for the key line here? And the last of the enemies to be done away with is death. I'd like to suggest to you to consider that another meaning of the last battle is not one that King Tyrion and the friends of Narnia ever fight. It's a battle that only Aslan can win to defeat death itself. He already did it in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And in this book, in the resurrection of the Friends of Narnia. Do you remember in this book, there is not a single living thing in this novel that survives this story alive. Everything dies. Everything dies. Which sounds so bleak. Why is it that we don't really notice that until I just forced you to hear that? Because of the power of the story and our faith in Aslan. This can't be the end. It couldn't end this way, with just slaughter everywhere. Death, Narnia itself disappears. We don't feel that. And so when the breakthrough happens inside the stable, oh, listen to this. You remember how Shift is described in the opening chapter of the book. He was so old that no one could remember when he had first come to live in those parts. And he was the cleverest, ugliest, most wrinkled ape you can imagine. Everything about him is ugly and gross. The way he thinks, the way he manipulates, dear Puzzle, who's so sweet, but just dumb as can be. But he's sweet. There's a gentleness in him, but so able to be manipulated by the ape. Contrast the way Aslan is described, whom the ape had said, Puzzle dressed in a little costume is as good as Aslan. Listen, in chapter 13, how Aslan is described. Let him alone, said Eustace, referring to the dwarfs at this point. But as he spoke, the earth trembled. The sweet air grew suddenly sweeter. A brightness flashed behind them. All turned. Tyrion turned last because he was afraid. There stood his heart's desire, huge and real. The golden lion, Aslan himself. And already the others were kneeling in a circle round his forepaws and burying their hands and faces in his mane as he stooped his great head to touch them with his tongue. Then he fixed his eyes upon Tyrion, and Tyrion came near, trembling, and flung himself at the lion's feet. And the lion kissed him and said, "Well done, last of the kings of Narnia, who stood firm at the darkest hour." Aslan is alive. And he's alive in a way that makes being alive for you and me right now, as we're at the Faber sessions tonight. We're alive, yes. But being alive in that other way is something completely different. It's the same and different. There's a vividness that's present in the aliveness that Aslan offers. And it's described in different places in the stories that everything, the trees themselves are alive. The animals that we thought were dumb actually speak to each other and can be friends with each other and us. All is woven. It's an aliveness that we've longed for. Sometimes the crap we put up with. Like, really? This book, like all Christian teaching about the end times, is very poorly done and wrongly and hurtfully done when it scares us, meant to make us afraid of meeting God. And things like last judgment cause us to feel terrible fear. There's something so deeply wrong and profoundly distorting in so-called theology like that. What Lewis makes us understand is the beauty and life that has always been offered and is being offered to us. And we selling ourselves for such cheap goods. It's the last things are the most beautiful. It's what we've always longed for. When beautiful moments in our lives go too quickly, we say, why does it have to be gone so quickly? To actually, for them to remain. People we love that are so hard to say goodbye to. No more goodbyes. the last things and the way Lewis paints it in this book is what we've always longed for. It's the real Narnia. Our world, which is just shadows of what actually completely surrounds us. That's why the geometry is important. Heaven is not up there and hell down there and we're in the middle. Heaven is completely around us, like a sphere. It penetrates us at every angle. And sometimes we're just constantly like dwarves. I'm not going to be taken in. I know how this world works. I know the way it goes. And we just don't. The glory is right there. Lewis wants us to feel the call of heaven. Not so that we can get the heck out of here, because we have things that we have to do. We have to serve Aslan in this world. But we serve with greater joy and are protected from despair and cynicism when what we bring to the arguments of the world and to the battles of the world is this clear sense of what is being offered all of us without checking any of our IDs. It's offered to all of us. And if it brightens our eyes and makes us fiercely confident in what is being offered us, we will come at the battles of this world in such a different way than the dwarvish way. No one's going to take me in, by God, and I'll kill both sides so that neither of them win. Isn't it amazing what he does in this novel? It's to give us a vision of heaven that we can long for, not be afraid of. Oh my gosh, you and I just don't even sin very well, even at our worst. And to come before Aslan the great lion and with one look, we would just run to him with nothing to say. And he'd say, I already know, dear one. I always did. Welcome home. Farther up, further in. I just think we've wrecked the Last Judgment idea and turned it into terror. A huge human invasion of beautiful theology. I think the Last Judgment, to be playful with you, is this astonishing judgment that we come to, that we had God wrong all along. And he's so much better than we thought. And so much more real and beautiful. The Last Judgment, I think, is one we'll make. What was I thinking all these years? And the joy that we'll then feel, and the astonishment, the wordless sputtering. Another meaning of the last battle is the one between the world that Aslan offers, standing right there, and the world of the dwarves, standing right there, sitting in a circle, right there, surrounded by heaven. Will we live in the world too smart for our britches We know how it goes. We've got it figured out. No one's going to take us in. I'm going to get what's mine. Kind of that dwarvish way that he's trying to describe. It's us relying on ourselves. The ultimate hell. Or is it the world that's all around them, the dwarves, in which it's all about Aslan and a recognition that the greatest battle is one we never have to fight because he wins that one and death is overcome and life is ours to just keep entering deeper and deeper in for all eternity. There's the last battle. What do you choose? What do I choose? The world I can count on that I've got figured out, or the world of mystery in which it's all about who God is and us simply trusting him with our very life. I hope you found that helpful too. There's a lot just in the title, The Last Battle. There's a lot of layers there. Any comment?
I like when Aslan talks to the young Calorman who worshipped Tash all his life, not knowing that he was really worshiping Aslan because Tash could have nothing good and Aslan could have nothing bad.
It's a
He
beautiful.
still was confused. Even after talking to Aslan, he was still a bit confused, but I guess he's got time to get that figured out in his head as he goes further up and further in.
He's a beautiful character and clearly one of the heroes of the Chronicles. But I guess one of the ways I'd reply to what you just said there, Katie, is in all my life, in the work that I have done with people, my favorite to be able to interact with are those well, in certain ways, atheists, people who reject it all. Because I think it's just hilarious. It's the most impossible position a person could possibly hold. Even the very name, atheist, has the word God in it. So it's a reactive formation. The most difficult kinds of people that I've dealt with in my life are those who imagine they're already fully knowledgeable about who God is. They are the most difficult because so much has to be deconstructed. And I say this as much to myself. I mean, I'm talking to myself in my journey of outgrowing theologies as I've grown, that I had to be able to let go because it no longer made any sense for me to hold these things that I used to hold on to, because my experience and wider context of the world proved it wasn't sufficient. Emmett truly doesn't know. He was worshiping a false god, but he did it with sincerity of heart. C.S. Lewis, just to remind you, wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And he wrote in a letter somewhere, he said the reason he wrote it was to sneak by the watchful dragons. And what he meant by the watchful dragons were all the religious experts who knew exactly who God is and how everything worked, how grace worked, how the sacraments worked, they had it all figured out. And they had it so well figured out that he wondered whether they had forgotten to know God in the process. But how vigilant they were about anyone speaking wrongly. So he wanted to write the Chronicles as a way of sneaking back by those watchful dragons and opening up the beauty of our faith and the mystery of Christ through It's Just a Kid's Story, to bring with enormous power the very heart of the gospel. And the watchful dragons won't notice because it's not being published as a book of theology. And I think this particular book is a wonderful one in dismantling our understanding of final judgment and what that actually is. It's what we've been longing for our whole life, not something to be feared. Gary.
Thank you. This whole hour and a half tonight has just been wonderful, Rick. I thank you so much for your insights. In particular, what you just said, and also building on what Katie said, it really is an extraordinary gem in the middle of this book. This young Calormene who thinks that he's been a bad guy. And it's like he's learning through Aslan, he's learning through this deeper vision of what it means to be following God, that even if you don't see yourself as following God, if your heart is pure, if there's honor, if there's a commitment to goodness, to truthfulness, that is God in you, calling you to him and rescuing you from the being enslaved to the Tisroc. And it's like, it really, combined with your comments about what the last battle means for me, I'm going to continue until the day I die, I'm sure, fighting that battle. So I'm not going to find some holy hill to go climbing up. But I love how C.S. Lewis uses that metaphor. But at the heart of it, we can be at peace with God in knowing that when we are looking to be kind, to be pure, to be holy in the ways that all of the great religious leaders, Jesus, but not just Jesus. You see it in Moses, you see it in Muhammad, to actually see that grace and live for that. That's the way God is moving us back into his embrace. And this is just such a glorious tale of that process, and that, especially that little segment. I'm so glad Katie brought it up about this man who's just now so convinced that he's an idiot. And yet he's done all the things that God wants him to do, that Aslan wanted him to do, and he's healed in that.
Yeah, thank you. I have a good friend of mine, they now live in Spokane, but he named his youngest, who's a son, Emmett, after this character. Yeah, understand why. Any other comments? We're just moments away. Just want to double check here. And I didn't mean to ask you a question and then immediately go off. I'm listening. Any other comment? then I'd like to conclude this way. We're made to understand that all the friends of Narnia, the 7 friends, and their parents, except the 2, Jill and Eustace, who are already in Narnia with King Tyrion, that they all died in a train wreck, which Aslan tells them. Haven't you figured it out yet, dear ones? What? And they remembered this terrible noise and sound and a jolt. It's described so beautifully in Through the Stable Door. Oh, I wish I could read it to you, but you've read it, or you will. We're made to understand that they all died at the same time. Jill and Eustace were killed and thrown into the stable and went through the transformation. And as soon as they got there, the other friends of Narnia also got there, so that they're all united at the same. And so their death was a real death, but it was a death that was the only way to the life that they'd always longed for. I wonder if I might just conclude this time, this book, but also this long 8-month journey through the Faber Sessions Series 10 that included the 7 novels and then the 1 Christmas Carols in December to help prepare us for that original stable. In the spirituality of St. Ignatius, the highest point or the deepest point of the spirituality is expressed in a prayer that a retreatant in the 30-day silent retreat, that is the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, is invited to make his or her own, but only if he or she can make it his or her own. And the whole experience of 30 days of prayer is to get them to a point where they could actually say this prayer, not fully understanding it, but fully meaning what they say when they say it. And I wonder if I could pop the words up in front for you to see. It's a song. It's the prayer put to music by a Jesuit by the name of Dan Schutte. And it'll be, I would say, maybe our valedictory, our signing off of this journey through the Narnia, Chronicles of Narnia. So I will put it on, and Mary, you'll have to tell me whether the sound comes through well enough, okay? Because I'm going to try to pop it up by sharing the screen. But I don't know, and so I'm going to try. I want to put both the words, and I want to see if I can. Yes, I can. So follow along with the words, and let this be our passage through the stable, taking us farther up and further in with this song. And Mary, you'll have to let me know whether you can hear it.
Take my heart, oh, take my hopes and dreams. Take my mind with all its plans and schemes. Give me nothing more than your love and grace. These alone don't glory know for me. Take my heart, take my tears.
Is it not coming through? What happened?
It started a little bit at the beginning, but it's like it's trying to pull out any muffled noises, I think.
The darn setting. I am so sorry. I really wanted it to. To me, it was a perfect way of signing off. Heartbreaking.
Well, maybe we could send the link to it in the email tomorrow, at least.
But so I'll just read it as our final prayer. I want you to imagine with me that we're saying goodbye to Narnia. All the dreams and sorrows, all the plans and schemes. There is a proper mourning at the ending of Narnia, as Aslan calls the stars back home and brings to an end this beautiful world where we receive so much. And rather than having it taken from us, maybe we can pray this prayer in the freedom that he gives us as we pass through the stable door and let Aslan do what he does. Take my heart, O Lord. Take my hopes and dreams. Take my mind with all its plans and schemes. Give me nothing more than your love and grace. These alone, O God, are enough for me. Take my thoughts, O Lord, and my memory. Take my tears, my joys, my liberty. Give me nothing more than your love and grace. These alone, O God, are enough for me. I surrender, Lord, all I have and hold. I return to you your gifts untold. Give me nothing more than your love and grace. These alone, O God, are enough for me. And when the darkness falls on my final days, take the very breath that sang your praise. Give me nothing more than your love and grace. These alone, O God, are enough for me. Amen. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you so much for all of you that either joined for all of this class or for this one or a few of them. It has been a wonderful journey, and how lovely to be able to go through all of these together. If you find that you're missing the conversations about Narnia, this was actually the Faber sessions that started the whole idea of Faber sessions. And it was Father Ganz did this also back in 2020. And those recordings are on our website. If you wanted to listen to a different version of them, of course, each one is a little different because of the time and the people who were with us. So those are there for you as well. This is the conclusion of the Faber sessions for this springtime months, but we do have one more night school class, and that will be next month on the 3rd Tuesday of May. So that's May 21st, and that is continuing our series on angels. And so I'll send out information about that. And also in May, we have a mother's retreat for any of you who are local to the Portland area. That's a Saturday in May, I believe the day before Mother's Day, led by Tara Ludwig of the Institute.
And Mary, don't forget that we do have a night school in this month, April.
Oh gosh, yes,
Yeah.
and then April. Thank
yeah.
you for that. Then we have in a couple of weeks, we have the night school.
Next week, actually next week, because this got pushed back a week. Normally there's 2 weeks in between, but because of Easter Monday, we had to move this to the next Monday.
I think it's the 23rd.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's in 2 weeks. But
Okay.
that's with St. Peter Faber, who is our patron saint of the Faber Institute. So yes, I skipped ahead a month. So that is on the 23rd. Anyway, I'll send all of these details out in the follow-up email. So wonderful to be with you all this evening, and we hope you have a good rest of your week. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Thank
Father.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Beautiful.
much.
So nice.
Oh, nice to be with you.
Good night and thank you.
You're
Can
so
we-
welcome.